2 children. 1 rural home. A single morning in May. Gone without a trace. 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack disappeared from their Nova Scotia home on May 2, 2025. Their boots were missing. The back door was closed. Within an hour, their mother called 911. 8 months later, over 1,000 tips, more than 1,300 investigative tasks, and 160 volunteers searching 8.5 square kilometers of wilderness, and still, no answers. The only physical evidence? A pink blanket caught in a tree 1 kilometer from home. This is Cold Case Desk. I'm your host, and today we're examining one of Canada's most perplexing missing persons cases. A disappearance so unusual that a 33-year veteran investigator says he's never seen anything like it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this case has developments you need to hear. Let's start with what we know about May 2, 2025. Lansdowne Station, Pictou County, Nova Scotia. A hamlet of roughly 100 residents. Rural. Heavily forested. The kind of place where neighbors know each other and children play outside. At a mobile home on Gairloch Road lived Malihia Brooks Murray, age 28, her common-law partner Daniel Martel, and 3 children. 6-year-old Lily, 4-year-old Jack, and their 1-year-old half-sister Meadow. The morning started normally, or so it seemed. Brooks Murray and Martel were in their bedroom with baby Meadow. Lily came in and out of the room several times. Jack could be heard playing in the kitchen. Normal morning sounds. Normal routines. Then, silence. The children's boots were gone. The back sliding door, which reportedly opened silently, was closed. No screaming. No struggle. No goodbye. At 10:01 a.m., Brooks Murray dialed 911. Her children were missing. But here's where the timeline gets critical and complicated. The last confirmed public sighting of Lilly and Jack occurred the previous afternoon, May 1st, at 2:25 p.m. Surveillance footage captured them with family members at a Dollarama store in New Glasgow, about 20 minutes from their home. They were alive. They were with family. Everything appeared normal. Brooks Murray had called both children in sick from Salt Springs Elementary School on May 1st and again on May 2nd. The reason? Lily had a cough. So what happened in those approximately 20 hours between that store visit and the 911 call? Step-grandmother Janie McKenzie lived in a separate building on the same property. She told investigators she heard the children laughing and playing on the swings around 8:50 a.m. on May 2nd. She fell asleep shortly after. When she woke, they were gone. Daniel Martel later reported hearing what he thought could have been a child's scream while searching the nearby woods. But an overhead helicopter made it impossible to hear clearly. That pink blanket I mentioned? A relative discovered it that same afternoon, approximately 1 kilometer from the home, caught in a tree on Lansdowne Road. It was later confirmed to belong to Lily. 2 days later, on May 4th, a second piece of that same blanket was found in a trash bag at the end of the family's driveway. Child-sized boot prints were located along a nearby pipeline trail. 2 different sizes. And then, nothing. No more physical evidence. No clothing. No backpacks. No bodies. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, launched an immediate response. By that first afternoon, volunteers were already combing through the dense forest surrounding the property. Helicopters circled overhead. Search dogs tracked through underbrush still thick with debris from Hurricane Fiona, which had devastated the region in 2022. The terrain was treacherous. Fallen trees. Dense vegetation, multiple ponds and bodies of water. If 2 small children had wandered into those woods, the conditions were unforgiving. By the second day, the search had expanded dramatically. More than 160 ground search and rescue volunteers worked in shifts, covering 8.5 square kilometers of wilderness. Helicopters, drones, police dogs trained in both live tracking and cadaver detection. The RCMP's underwater recovery team searched multiple ponds and Lansdowne Lake. Nothing. After 6 exhausting days, on May 7th, authorities made the difficult decision to scale back the search. Staff Sergeant Curtis McKinnon delivered the news everyone dreaded. The likelihood that Lily and Jack were still alive was very low. Let that sink in. Within 1 week, investigators were already preparing families and the public for the worst possible outcome. But here's what makes this case so unusual, so deeply perplexing. There was no worst outcome to confirm. No bodies. No crime scene. No evidence of foul play. Just 2 missing children and a pink blanket torn in half. Think about what that means. 2 children, ages 6 and 4, vanish from a property where adults were present. They leave behind boot prints suggesting they walked away. A blanket is found a kilometer from home, torn into pieces that show up in 2 separate locations days apart. Every element of this case raises more questions than answers. If the children wandered into the woods, why hasn't extensive searching found anything? If they were taken, why is there no evidence of a vehicle? If something happened at the home, why does physical evidence point away from it? We need to talk about the family. But first, let me be crystal clear about something. As of January 2026, no one has been named a suspect in this case. The RCMP has explicitly stated they are not treating anyone as criminally responsible. This remains classified as a missing persons investigation under Nova Scotia's Missing Persons Act. That's important because what comes next involves allegations, court documents, and family dysfunction, but none of it has led to criminal charges. The children's mother, Malihia Brooks Murray, is Mi'kmaq, a member of the Sipekne'katik First Nation. Their biological father, Cody Sullivan, age 29, had not seen his children in approximately 3 years before the disappearance. He had been paying child support until losing his job 9 months prior to May 2025. When Brooks Murray called police at 12:45 a.m. on May 3rd, hours after the initial report, suggesting Sullivan might have taken the children to New Brunswick, officers visited his home at 2:50 a.m. He denied any involvement. He later voluntarily took a polygraph examination. He passed. In fact, 7 individuals connected to this case underwent polygraph testing, including Brooks Murray, Martel, Sullivan, and various grandparents. According to court documents unsealed in January 2026, all 7 were found to be truthful. So if everyone is telling the truth, where are Lilly and Jack? Before we dive deeper into the investigation, I want you to understand who these children were, because they were not statistics. They were not just names in a case file. Lilly was 6 years old. She loved what her family called girly things. She followed her little brother everywhere, protective and devoted. She was in kindergarten at Salt Springs Elementary School. Jack was 4. He adored bugs and dinosaurs. He was still learning to use the bathroom independently, still growing into himself. He looked up to his big sister. These were real children with real personalities, real likes and dislikes, real futures that should have included birthdays and holidays and first days of school. Instead, we have a case file. We have searches. We have theories. And we have a community that will never be the same. The search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan became one of the most extensive missing persons operations in Nova Scotia history. Let me give you the numbers, because the scale of this effort matters. More than 160 ground search and rescue volunteers at peak operations. 8.5 square kilometers of densely wooded, hurricane-damaged terrain covered. Over 1,050 tips received. More than 1,300 distinct investigative tasks generated. 86 formal interviews conducted. 8,100 video files reviewed, dashcam footage, trail cameras, residential security systems, store surveillance. 12 search warrants obtained for phone records, banking information, and surveillance footage from businesses along routes the family traveled. The RCMP deployed helicopters, drones, thermal imaging technology, canine units trained in both live tracking and cadaver detection, and their specialized underwater recovery team. They searched ponds. They searched Lansdowne Lake. They searched the pipeline trails where those child-sized boot prints were found. They searched the property itself, the surrounding forest, the roads leading away from Gairloch Road. For 6 straight days, volunteers worked in shifts from dawn until dark, calling out the children's names, moving methodically through underbrush, checking under fallen trees, looking in culverts and drainage areas. The terrain was punishing. Hurricane Fiona had torn through Pictou County in September 2022, leaving behind massive tree damage, altered landscapes, and debris fields that created countless places a small child could become trapped or hidden. If Lilly and Jack had wandered into those woods, searchers faced the nightmare scenario every volunteer dreads. 2 small children, possibly injured, possibly deceased, lost in terrain that actively fought against discovery. But as days turned into weeks, as May gave way to June and then July, something became increasingly clear to investigators. Either the children were never in those woods, or they were hidden so completely that even the most sophisticated search techniques couldn't locate them. In late September 2025, almost 5 months after the disappearance, specialized cadaver dogs were brought in for an intensive secondary search. These dogs are trained specifically to detect human remains, even decomposed or buried remains. They're accurate. They're reliable. They're the gold standard for recovery operations. The handlers took the dogs through 40 kilometers of high-probability areas. The property itself, the pipeline trails, the exact location where Lilly's pink blanket was found, every place where evidence had been discovered or where the terrain suggested concealment. The dogs detected nothing. Staff Sergeant Stephen Pike addressed the significance of this result directly. The dogs found no indication they were ever in the presence of human remains odor. Think about what that means. If the children had died in those woods, if their remains were anywhere within the searched areas, those dogs should have alerted. They didn't. So either the children are not in the searched areas, or they're alive somewhere, or they were never in the forest at all. This is where the investigation pivots. Because if we eliminate the lost in the woods scenario, we're left with far more troubling possibilities. Abduction by a stranger. Abduction by someone known to the family. Foul play at the home with disposal of remains elsewhere. A carefully planned removal of the children from the area. Each scenario has problems. Stranger abduction? The property is relatively isolated, but not invisible. Gairloch Road has neighbors. The pipeline trails have users. Someone would have seen something. A vehicle, a person, unusual activity. Despite more than 1,000 tips, no credible sighting has emerged. Abduction by someone known to the family? The biological father passed a polygraph. Extended family members passed polygraphs. No evidence points to anyone in the family circle. Foul play at the home? Both Brooks Murray and Martell passed polygraphs. The physical evidence, the boot prints, the blanket found away from the home, suggests the children left the property. Which brings us to the most puzzling piece of physical evidence, that pink blanket. A relative found the first piece on the afternoon of May 2nd, caught in a tree approximately 1 kilometer from the home on Lansdowne Road. Confirmed to be Lilly's. 2 days later, a second piece of the same blanket was found in a trash bag at the end of the family's driveway. How does a blanket end up torn in half, with pieces appearing in 2 completely different locations days apart? Theory 1. Lilly was carrying the blanket when they left. It caught on something and tore. She kept walking with part of it. The piece left behind was later found. Problem. Why would the second piece show up days later in a trash bag at the driveway? Who put it there? Theory 2. The blanket was torn intentionally and placed in both locations to create a trail, suggesting the children walked away. Problem. Why? And by whom? And how does this fit with the polygraph results? Theory 3. The children did walk away carrying the blanket, and the second piece fell from Jack or Lilly closer to home, but wasn't noticed until someone cleaned up days later and placed it in trash. Problem. Searchers were all over that property. How did they miss it for 2 days? None of the explanations make complete sense. And then there are the boot prints. Child-sized. 2 different sizes, consistent with Lilly and Jack. Found on pipeline trails near the property. Boots that were confirmed missing from the home. If those were the children's prints, they walked away. They were mobile. They were moving under their own power. But the pipeline trails were searched extensively. Dogs tracked those trails. Volunteers walked every accessible meter. If the children continued on those trails, where did they go? Did someone pick them up? Did they become disoriented and wander off trail into dense forest where they haven't been found? Or were the boot prints left deliberately to create false direction? I know how conspiracy-minded that sounds. But in a case this unusual, with physical evidence this sparse and contradictory, investigators have to consider every possibility. Here's what RCMP Chief Superintendent Dan Morrow said in an interview. This case is extremely rare. In his 33 years of law enforcement, he's never seen anything comparable. Staff Sergeant Rob McCommon has been even more direct. When asked about suspects, he stated unequivocally, "I wouldn't say anybody's a suspect." That's both reassuring and deeply frustrating. Reassuring because it means investigators don't have evidence pointing to family involvement. Frustrating because if no one in the immediate circle is responsible, then who is? And how? The case technically remains a missing persons investigation, though court submissions acknowledge it could become criminal and persons of interest in the disappearance of the children might be identified. That language is careful. That language is deliberate. That language tells us investigators are keeping options open while following evidence, or the lack thereof. In June 2025, the Nova Scotia government added the case to its Rewards for Major Unsolved Crimes program, offering up to $150,000 for information leading to the resolution of the case. $150,000. That's not a token reward. That's serious money designed to motivate someone, somewhere, who knows something to come forward. So far, that hasn't happened. The investigation has involved more than 11 RCMP units, with assistance from units in New Brunswick and Ontario, the National Centre for Missing Persons, and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. This is a coordinated, professional, resource-intensive operation. And yet, 8 months later, we have no answers. The warden of Pictou County, Robert Parker, described the community as feeling tense, with disappointment and sadness pervading daily life. These children have almost become everybody's children in this county, he told CBC. Parents have become more apprehensive about letting their own children play unsupervised. The sense of safety that defined rural Nova Scotia life has been shattered. On October 29, 2025, what would have been Jack's 5th birthday, approximately 40 people gathered outside the RCMP detachment in Stellarton for a vigil. They lit candles. They released 5 blue balloons. They listened as paternal grandmother Belinda Gray read a poem titled Birthday Promise to Jack. Daniel Martel attended the vigil. He told reporters he no longer believed the children were in the woods. In light of all the searches and efforts, he did not find it plausible that the children were still in the area. If not in the area, then where? That's the question that haunts every investigator, every volunteer, every family member, and every person following this case. Where are Lilly and Jack Sullivan? Before we go further, I need to address something head-on. This is a missing children case. That means there are limits, ethical, legal, and moral limits, to what I can and should discuss. There are allegations in court documents that involve family members. Those allegations have not resulted in criminal charges. Those allegations exist in a context where grief, trauma, and desperate searching for answers create complicated dynamics. I'm going to share what's been made public through court documents, but I want to be absolutely clear. Allegations are not proof. Court documents are not convictions. And families in crisis often say and claim things that don't reflect complete reality. With that said, the January 2026 unsealing of previously redacted court documents revealed troubling information about the household where Lilly and Jack lived in the months before they vanished. Malihia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel were common-law partners, living together with 3 children at the Gairloch Road property. Brooks Murray was the biological mother of Lilly and Jack. Martel was their stepfather. Together, Brooks Murray and Martel had a 1-year-old daughter, Meadow. Also on the property, Martel's stepmother, Janie McKenzie, who lived in a separate building. The children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, had not been involved in their lives for approximately 3 years. Child support had been paid until Sullivan lost his job 9 months before the disappearance. According to family members, Sullivan had struggled with substance use issues in the past. There's no indication those issues were active at the time of the disappearance, and again, he passed a polygraph examination and has not been named a suspect. So that's the family structure. Now let's talk about what those court documents revealed. Brooks Murray was interviewed by RCMP 5 times in the days following the disappearance. During her 5th interview, conducted on May 9, 2025, after she had separated from Martel and blocked him on social media, she alleged that Martel would try to block her, hold her down, and once he pushed her. She also claimed he would take her phone when she tried to call her mother, and that these interactions would sometimes be physical and hurt. These are serious allegations. These are allegations of intimate partner violence. Daniel Martel has vehemently and repeatedly denied all abuse allegations. In interviews with media following the unsealing of the court documents, he called the claims a narrative designed to paint him as evil and a monster. He maintains he has fully cooperated with investigators. He voluntarily took a polygraph examination on May 12, 2025. He passed. He voluntarily provided a blood sample for DNA analysis in connection with testing on Lilly's blanket. The polygraph is significant. While polygraphs aren't admissible in Canadian courts, they're used by investigators as an investigative tool. A past polygraph doesn't prove innocence, but it also doesn't suggest deception. 7 people took polygraphs in this case. 7 people passed. So what do we make of Brooks Murray's allegations? It's entirely possible for intimate partner violence to exist in a relationship where the perpetrator can still pass a polygraph about a different matter, like the disappearance of children. Polygraphs measure stress responses to specific questions. Someone can truthfully answer, "I don't know where the children are," while still having been abusive in the relationship. It's also possible that the allegations emerged in the context of trauma, relationship breakdown, and the unimaginable stress of having 2 children missing. People say things. People make claims. That doesn't automatically make them true or false. It makes them claims that need investigation. Here's what we know for certain. No charges have been filed against Daniel Martel. The RCMP has not named him a suspect. He attended Jack's birthday vigil in October, and family members have not publicly excluded him from gatherings. Now let's talk about child welfare involvement, because this is where the case gets even more complicated. Court documents revealed that a social worker from Nova Scotia's Child Protection Agency had visited the home months before the disappearance. The visit was prompted by concerns raised by Salt Springs Elementary School about developmental delays in Lilly and Jack. According to reporting by the Globe and Mail, school staff had noted that the children sometimes arrived grubby and without appropriate winter clothing. They appeared thin, possibly malnourished with dry, cracked lips. A school photograph from December 2024 showed Jack with a black eye. These observations resulted in a referral to Child Protective Services. Daniel Martel has maintained that the visit concerned instruction and support for the children's behavior, not concerns about abuse or neglect. He stated the children had developmental delays but were receiving appropriate support. Child Protective Services assessed the situation. According to available information, no removal of the children occurred. No ongoing intervention was mandated. The file was apparently closed. And then, months later, Lilly and Jack disappeared. This is where families like Belinda Gray, paternal grandmother to the children, have called for a public inquiry. Just what did CPS do? She asked in media interviews. I think the public has a right to know. It's a fair question. When child protection is notified of concerns, when assessments are conducted, and then children in that home subsequently vanish, people want to know if something was missed. Could intervention have prevented this? Were there warning signs that weren't acted upon? Nova Scotia's child protection system has faced scrutiny before. The province has a troubled history of removing Indigenous children from their homes. Part of the broader Canadian tragedy of the 60s scoop and ongoing overrepresentation of Indigenous children in care. Malihia Brooks Murray is Mi'kmaq. Her children were Indigenous. Any child protection involvement would have occurred in that context, a context where Indigenous families rightly have deep mistrust of child welfare systems that have historically torn families apart. This is complicated. This is painful, and there are no simple answers. What we know, concerns were raised. Child protection assessed. The children remained in the home. Then they vanished. What we don't know, the full details of that assessment, what specific concerns were investigated, what supports were offered or mandated, whether follow-up occurred. Those details remain protected by privacy laws, and rightly so in most circumstances. But when children are missing, when the public is invested in finding them, when families are demanding accountability, privacy becomes a barrier to understanding. After Lilly and Jack disappeared, Brooks Murray's relationship with Martel ended. She left Lansdowne within days. She blocked Martel on social media. She largely avoided media contact. In the chaos that followed, their daughter Meadow was removed from Brooks Murray's custody by Child Protective Services. Brooks Murray had fled to the Sipeknecatic Reserve, her First Nation community, seeking safety and support. The removal of Meadow happened in this context. A mother whose 2 children are missing, whose relationship has ended, who is living in crisis. Was the removal justified? Was it another example of Indigenous children being taken from Indigenous mothers? We don't have enough information to judge. What we do have is a shattered family, a mother without her children, a stepfather defending himself against allegations, a biological father who had been absent for years trying to process grief, grandparents on both sides devastated and searching for answers, and 2 children who remain missing. Daniel Martel gave an interview in January 2026 after the court documents were unsealed. He addressed the abuse allegations directly. "I understand people want someone to blame," he said. "I understand this is unbearable. But I love those kids. I've cooperated fully. I've passed every test. And I don't know where they are." He expressed frustration with the narrative that had developed online, particularly in true crime communities. "They've decided I'm guilty. They've decided I'm hiding something. It doesn't matter what I say or what the police say. They've made up their minds." Martel also said something that investigators have echoed. He believes the children didn't wander into the woods. After all the searches, after all the efforts, he thinks someone took them. "I don't know who. I don't know how. But I don't think they walked away and got lost. I think someone has them, or had them." If Martel is right, if someone took Lilly and Jack, then we're looking at abduction. And if it's abduction, we need to consider who and why. Stranger abduction is statistically rare, but does happen. Child predators exist. People with disturbed minds exist. But stranger abductions usually leave evidence, witnesses, vehicles, digital footprints. This case is none of that. Abduction by someone known to the family? Everyone tested has passed polygraphs. Extended family members have alibis. There's no evidence pointing to anyone specific, which leaves the most disturbing possibility. Someone unknown to investigators, someone outside the immediate circle, someone who had access or opportunity that hasn't been identified. The RCMP is clearly pursuing technological and investigative techniques that haven't been disclosed publicly. Court documents reference leveraging technologically based investigative police techniques, which may provide information to support criminality. That language suggests cell phone analysis, financial tracking, digital forensics, methods that take time but can reveal patterns, connections, movements. 8 months in, investigators remain methodical. They remain thorough. And they remain committed to finding Lilly and Jack Sullivan. But with each passing month, hope dims. Statistics on missing children are brutal. The longer they're gone, the less likely recovery becomes, especially alive. Still, families hold on. Communities hold on. And investigators keep working. Because somewhere, somehow, there has to be an answer. Let's talk about what makes this investigation so uniquely challenging, and why veteran investigators call it unlike anything they've seen before. First, the evidence profile is minimal. One torn blanket, boot prints on a trail, no bodies, no crime scene, no witnesses to an abduction, no surveillance footage showing vehicles near the property at the critical time. In most missing persons cases, there's more to work with. A last known location, witnesses who saw the person in distress, a vehicle captured on camera, digital breadcrumbs, cell phone data, bank transactions, social media activity. Lilly was 6. Jack was 4. They didn't have phones. They didn't have social media. They didn't drive. Their digital footprint was essentially zero. The last confirmed sighting was that Dollarama surveillance footage from May 1st at 2:25 p.m. From that moment until the 911 call at 10:01 a.m. on May 2nd, we have only family accounts of the children's activities and whereabouts. That's approximately 20 hours where everything relies on testimony from people inside the home. Now, RCMP has stated clearly those people are not suspects. They've passed polygraphs. There's no evidence of deception, but it creates an investigative challenge. How do you verify a timeline when the only witnesses are family members and the missing children can't speak for themselves? This is where technological investigation comes in. Court documents reference the RCMP seeking warrants for phone records, banking information, and various forms of surveillance footage. They've reviewed over 8,100 video files from multiple sources. What are they looking for? Cell tower data can show where phones were located at specific times. If someone left the property when they claimed they didn't, cell data would show it. Banking and transaction records can show purchases, withdrawals, ATM usage. If someone bought supplies consistent with disposing of remains, shovels, tarps, cleaning supplies, that would show up. Surveillance footage from businesses along routes leading away from Lansdowne can show vehicles. Dashcam footage from passing motorists can capture unexpected details. The RCMP has been collecting all of this. They've been analyzing all of this. And so far, nothing has produced a break in the case. That either means everyone is telling the truth, and something genuinely unexplainable happened, or someone has been extraordinarily careful in avoiding digital evidence. Let me walk you through the scenarios investigators are likely considering. Scenario 1. The children wandered into the wilderness and perished. This was the initial working theory. It made sense. Rural property, dense forest, young children, early morning when adults were distracted. The boot prints support this. The blanket found a kilometer away supports this. The timeline, children playing outside at 8:50 a.m., gone by 10 a.m., fits. But the extensive searches found nothing. Cadaver dogs found nothing. 40 kilometers of high-probability terrain yielded no human remains. Statisticians will tell you that in searches of this intensity, with this many resources, bodies are usually found if they're in the searched area. Not always. Terrain can hide remains remarkably well, but usually. The longer this scenario goes without evidence, the less likely it becomes. Scenario 2. The children were abducted by a stranger. Possible but problematic. Gairloch Road isn't a major throughway. Someone would have had to know children lived at that property. They would have had to watch, wait for opportunity, and act in a narrow window when the children were outside but adults weren't watching closely. Then they would have had to leave with 2 children without being seen, without leaving tire tracks, without triggering any witness accounts. Over 1,050 tips have come in. None have produced credible sightings of the children or suspicious vehicles in the area. Stranger abduction can't be ruled out, but it's difficult to square with the evidence, or lack thereof. Scenario 3. The children were taken by someone known to the family. Biological father? Past polygraph. Has alibi for the morning of May 2nd. Extended family? Multiple members tested. All passed. Friends of the family? Investigators have interviewed dozens of people in the family social circle. Nothing has emerged. If someone in the family circle is responsible, they've been remarkably composed through polygraph examinations, maintained consistent stories through multiple interviews, and avoided any digital or physical evidence. Not impossible, but difficult. Scenario 4. Something happened at the home and the evidence was staged to suggest the children walked away. This is the scenario that probably keeps investigators up at night. If something happened inside the home, an accident, a moment of violence, something that resulted in the children's deaths, could the scene have been staged? Boot prints could be created by walking in the children's boots. A blanket could be torn and placed strategically. A timeline could be constructed that gives false alibis. But again, polygraphs were passed. Forensic examination of the home presumably occurred, though details haven't been released. DNA testing on the blanket has been conducted. If staging occurred, it was sophisticated enough to fool experienced investigators and forensic technicians. Scenario 5. The children are alive and being held somewhere. This is the hope against hope scenario. Someone took them, but not to harm them. They're being hidden, possibly even cared for. Why? That's where this scenario falls apart. Who benefits from taking 2 children? What motive makes sense? Custody dispute? The biological father was tested and cleared. Human trafficking? Possible, but extremely rare in rural Nova Scotia. And traffickers don't usually take 2 children simultaneously from a home. Delusional individual who wanted children? Can't rule it out, but again, no evidence, no witnesses, no leads pointing in this direction. I'm laying out these scenarios not to solve the case. I can't, but to show you why investigators are stymied. Every direction they turn, the evidence or lack thereof creates problems. And this is where the investigation gets painstaking. Staff Sergeant Rob McCommon described the process. This is not a file that just sits at work. We need answers as to what took place. That means investigators are working through those 1,300-plus investigative tasks methodically, following up on every tip, even the ones that seem far-fetched, re-interviewing witnesses to check for inconsistencies, consulting with experts in child psychology, forensic science, search and rescue. They're doing what police are supposed to do, following evidence, building timelines, eliminating possibilities until they're left with the truth. But what if the truth is something they haven't considered? What if this case is genuinely unprecedented? Criminologist Dr. Michael Arntfield of Western University called it exactly that, unprecedented. He noted it's highly unlikely for 2 siblings who live together to vanish when a parent is not involved, and there's no evidence of that. He suggested investigators may have lost key momentum and leads when they were out in the fields looking for kids that maybe were never there. That's a sobering thought. If the massive search effort was misdirected from the start, If the children were already gone from the area before searchers even began, then critical hours and days were lost. But investigators made reasonable decisions based on available evidence. Boot prints suggesting the children walked away. A blanket found in the direction of the forest. Testimony from family members consistent with children wandering off. They had to search. They had to assume the worst-case wilderness scenario and act accordingly. Now, 8 months later, they're in a different phase. The intensive search is over. The focus has shifted to investigative techniques, interviews, forensics, analysis. The RCMP continues to encourage the public to come forward with information. That $150,000 reward remains available. The tip line remains open. But there's also reality. Cases like this, with this little evidence, with this much time passed, often go cold. That's not giving up. That's acknowledging that without a break, a witness coming forward, a piece of physical evidence found, a digital footprint uncovered, resolution becomes increasingly difficult. Chief Superintendent Dan Morrow expressed confidence in his year-end interview that the case will eventually be solved. "We have investigators working on this daily," he said. "We have resources. We have commitment." He also acknowledged the community impact. "I know people want answers now. I know families are suffering. But we have to do this right. We have to build a case that will stand up in court if it comes to that." That language, "if it comes to that," suggests investigators believe this will eventually become a criminal matter. They're preparing for that possibility while keeping the investigation technically classified as missing persons. It's a delicate balance. Call it criminal too soon and you risk focusing prematurely on a theory that might be wrong. Keep it as missing persons too long and you risk looking like you're avoiding the obvious. So far, the RCMP seems to be managing that balance carefully. But the clock keeps ticking. 8 months, 9 months, eventually a year. And Lilly and Jack Sullivan remain missing. Now we need to talk about something uncomfortable. What happens when true crime entertainment collides with an active investigation? The Sullivan case has become a phenomenon online, particularly on YouTube and in true crime discussion forums. Channels dedicated to analyzing the case have popped up. Live streams dissecting every detail attract hundreds of thousands of views. Amateur sleuths share theories, debate evidence, and yes, accuse people. At the center of much of this coverage is a YouTube channel called It's a Criming Shame, hosted by Sonny Austin from Langley, British Columbia. The channel has essentially become dedicated Sullivan case coverage, with regular live streams and updates that draw massive audiences. Here's where it gets complicated. Family members have participated in these discussions. Paternal grandmother Belinda Gray has appeared as a guest on the channel to dispel hearsay and share her perspective. Step-grandmother Janie McKenzie has given interviews. Even Daniel Martel has commented during live streams, at one point writing, "I should release all the information I brought to major crimes that would point fingers. Why are family members engaging with true crime YouTubers while an active investigation is ongoing?" I think there are several reasons, none of them simple. First, frustration. The official investigation is slow, methodical, and largely silent. Family members don't get regular updates. They're living in agony, not knowing what happened to children they love. True crime channels offer a platform to speak, to be heard, to feel like they're doing something. Second, narrative control. When you're a person of interest, even unofficially, in a case like this, you watch as speculation builds online. People accuse you. People theorize about your involvement. Engaging with these channels lets you defend yourself, set the record straight, push back against rumors. Third, desperation. Maybe someone watching those videos knows something. Maybe getting the story out there, keeping it in public consciousness, will lead to the tip that breaks everything open. But there are serious problems with this dynamic. RCMP officials have acknowledged that while social media keeps cases in public awareness, it can also hamper the investigation when resources must be devoted to following up on tips that turn out to be just a comment made on social media. Think about that. Investigators already have 1,300 plus tasks to work through. Now add hundreds or thousands of tips generated by online speculation, most of which are based on partial information, misunderstanding, or outright fabrication. Every tip has to be followed up. Every lead has to be checked. That's how investigations work. You can't dismiss something without looking at it. So when someone on a live stream says, "I heard Martel's truck was seen near the lake that night," and 20 people call the tip line to report it. Investigators have to verify whether that's true. They have to pull surveillance footage, check vehicle registrations, interview witnesses, and if it turns out the truck was never near the lake, that it's just a rumor someone started online, that's time and resources wasted. Multiply that by hundreds of tips, and you can see how true crime coverage can actively impede professional investigation. But there's an even darker problem: the spreading of harmful misinformation. One particularly damaging rumor suggested the children were being hidden on the Sipekne'katik First Nation Reserve. The claim was that because their mother Malihia Brooks Murray is Mi'kmaq, and because she fled to the reserve after the disappearance, the children must be there. This rumor spread rapidly through Facebook groups and YouTube comment sections. It became common knowledge among armchair investigators. It was also completely false and deeply racist. Chief Michelle Glasgow of Sipekne'katik responded forcefully on Facebook. That whole dialogue was made up by a racist fool, and anyone entertaining it is a racist fool. She explained that the suggestion Indigenous people would hide missing children on reserve lands plays into centuries of racist stereotypes about Indigenous communities. It ignores the reality that reserves are not lawless zones where children can be hidden. It disrespects the cooperation Sipekne'katik has extended to RCMP. But the damage was done. The rumor persisted. People kept calling tips based on it. Resources were diverted, and an Indigenous community was subjected to racist scrutiny while grieving missing children. This is what happens when true crime becomes entertainment rather than journalism. When speculation becomes stated as fact. When platforms prioritize views and engagement over accuracy and ethics. And it's not just about Indigenous communities. Daniel Martel has been subjected to intense online scrutiny, with entire videos dedicated to analyzing his body language in interviews, dissecting his word choices, interpreting his social media posts for hidden meanings. Body language analysis is pseudoscience when done by non-experts analyzing compressed video footage. But it makes for compelling content. It gives viewers the illusion they're contributing to investigation. It generates engagement. It also destroys lives. Imagine being Daniel Martel. Your stepchildren are missing. You've cooperated with police. You've passed a polygraph. You've given interviews trying to help. And online, thousands of people have decided you're guilty. They've decided your denials are lies. They pick apart every word you say, every expression on your face. They send messages accusing you. They show up at your home. They harass your family members. Whether Martel is responsible or not, and again, police say there's no evidence he is. That's trial by social media. That's mob justice. And it's wrong. The same has happened to Brooks Murray. Her decision to leave Lansdowne, to block Martel, to avoid media, all of this has been interpreted as guilt by online theorists. Why would an innocent mother hide? They ask. Why won't she speak publicly? Maybe because she's traumatized. Maybe because she's following legal advice. Maybe because she knows anything she says will be torn apart by thousands of strangers with no accountability. I want to be clear about Cold Case Desk's approach. I cover cases based on publicly available information, court documents, official statements, and verified reporting. I don't speculate about guilt. I don't analyze body language. I don't promote theories based on hunches. When I say someone is a suspect, it's because law enforcement has named them as such. When I discuss evidence, it's evidence that's been officially confirmed. When I share timelines, they're based on documented sources. That's the standard for responsible, true crime coverage. Not every channel follows that standard. Not every podcaster cares about accuracy over virality. Not every armchair detective understands the harm their speculation can cause. The result? A case that's already difficult becomes harder to investigate. A community that's already traumatized faces additional pain. And the truth, whatever it is, gets buried under layers of rumor, theory, and accusation. RCMP Staff Sergeant McCommon addressed this directly in an interview. We appreciate people's interest in this case. We appreciate people wanting to help. But the most helpful thing anyone can do is report factual information through proper channels and let investigators do their work. He also pushed back on the constant pressure for updates. We can't share details of an active investigation. We can't compromise evidence. We can't name suspects until we have grounds to do so. I know that's frustrating, but it's necessary. It is frustrating. As someone who covers these cases, I understand the hunger for information, the desire to know what's happening, the frustration with official silence. But investigators aren't withholding information to be difficult. They're protecting the integrity of their case. Because if this does become a criminal trial, everything they say publicly can be used by defense attorneys. Every detail they release can compromise evidence. Every theory they share can taint jury pools. So they say little. They release minimal information. And they work behind the scenes, methodically and thoroughly. And the rest of us? We wait. We watch. We hope for answers. That waiting is agonizing for families. Belinda Gray has spoken about it repeatedly. Every day I wake up wondering if today is the day we'll get news. Every time my phone rings, my heart stops. I don't know which would be worse, never knowing or knowing the worst. That's the reality for families of missing persons. Not the excitement of true crime entertainment. Not the thrill of playing detective. Just endless, grinding uncertainty. The true crime community likes to say it's giving voice to victims and keeping cases alive. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes public attention does help. Sometimes a viewer really does have information that breaks a case. But sometimes, maybe most of the time, it just adds noise. It generates more suffering. And it turns tragedy into content. The Sullivan case has become content. There are playlists. There are live stream schedules. There are merch lines with Justice for Lilly and Jack branding. Is that wrong? I genuinely don't know. Maybe some of that money funds searches. Maybe it keeps attention on the case. Maybe it does some good. But it also feels exploitative. It feels like entertainment drawn from the suffering of real people who didn't ask to become YouTube stars. I'm not exempting myself from this criticism. Cold Case Desk covers cases like this. I'm part of this ecosystem. The difference, I hope, is an approach, focusing on facts, avoiding speculation, treating subjects as human beings rather than characters in a story. But the line is blurry. And every creator in this space should be asking themselves, am I helping or am I just profiting from tragedy? For the Sullivan family, the true crime attention has been a mixed blessing. It's kept the case in public consciousness. It's generated tips, some helpful, many not. It's given platforms to family members who feel voiceless. But it's also turned their grief into spectacle. It's subjected them to judgment from strangers. It's made their worst moments public entertainment. And through it all, Lilly and Jack remain missing. That's what matters. Not the views. Not the theories. Not the drama between family members playing out online. 2 children. Still missing. Still needing to be found. Everything else is noise. Lansdowne Station has roughly 100 residents. It's the kind of place where people know each other. Where kids play outside unsupervised. Where doors are left unlocked. Where the biggest concerns used to be weather and road conditions. On May 2nd, 2025, that innocence ended. Warden Robert Parker of Pictou County described the community transformation. These children have almost become everybody's children in this county. There's a sense that if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere. That's the psychological impact of cases like this. They shatter the illusion of safety. Parents in Lansdowne and surrounding areas have changed their behavior. Children who used to walk to friends' houses alone are now driven. Kids who played in yards without direct supervision are kept within sight. The freedom that defined rural childhood has been replaced with hypervigilance. Is that overreaction? Maybe. The Sullivan case is an isolated incident. There's no evidence of a predator targeting children in the area. Statistically, children in Lansdowne are as safe as they ever were. But statistics don't govern fear. When children can vanish from their own property on an ordinary morning, statistics stop matching. Local schools have been affected. Salt Springs Elementary, where Lilly was in kindergarten, has seen parents questioning safety protocols. How closely are children supervised during recess? Who has access to school grounds? What happens if a child doesn't show up for class? How quickly are parents notified? These are questions parents didn't ask before. Now they're constant. The economic impact has been subtle but real. Lansdowne isn't a tourist destination, but Pictou County relies on visitors who come for coastal scenery and rural charm. A high-profile missing children case doesn't help that image. Some bed and breakfast operators reported cancellations in the weeks following the disappearance. Real estate has been affected too. The Sullivan property sits unsold and largely abandoned. Who wants to live in the house where 2 children vanished? Who wants to be the family that moves into that space, with all its tragic history? But beyond economics, beyond safety concerns, There's the emotional toll on a community that came together to search and found nothing. Remember those 160 volunteers who spent 6 days searching 8.5 square kilometers? Those were neighbors, friends, community members who left their jobs, their families, their lives to search. They walked through brutal terrain calling out names. They checked under every fallen tree. They looked in culverts, ravines, old wells, abandoned structures. They hoped with every step they might be the one to find Lilly and Jack alive, cold but safe, waiting to be rescued. Instead, they found nothing. That takes a psychological toll. Volunteers in failed searches often experience guilt and grief. They question whether they missed something, whether they looked hard enough, whether they could have done more. Rationally, they know they did everything possible. Emotionally, it doesn't feel like enough when children remain missing. Some of those volunteers knew Lilly and Jack personally. They'd seen them at community events. They'd waved to them playing in yards. Now those same children are missing, and the volunteers carry the weight of not finding them. The vigils have been heartbreaking. That October 29th gathering for Jack's 5th birthday saw 40 people standing in cold weather, lighting candles, releasing balloons, and crying together. 5-year-olds should be having parties with cake and presents, not vigils with tears and prayers. Belinda Gray's poem at that vigil, Birthday Promise to Jack, spoke to the community's commitment. We won't stop looking. We won't forget. We will find you. 8 months later, that promise remains unfulfilled. The case has also exposed divisions within the community. Some residents believe the official investigation hasn't been aggressive enough. They question why no suspects have been named, why no arrests have been made, why the case remains technically classified as missing persons rather than criminal. Others defend the RCMP, arguing that investigators need time and evidence, that rushing to accusations without proof destroys lives and compromises justice. These divisions play out at coffee shops and community gatherings. Friendships have been strained. People choose sides. Team Martel, Team Brooks-Murray, Team, I don't know, but somebody's lying. It's corrosive. It's painful. And it's unavoidable when a community experiences trauma without resolution. There's also the Indigenous dimension. Malihia Brooks-Murray is Mi'kmaq. Her children were Indigenous. The rumors suggesting children were hidden on Sipeknekatik lands exposed racism that some community members didn't realize existed among their neighbors. Chief Michelle Glasgow spoke about this in her Facebook response. We have welcomed police. We have cooperated fully. We have prayed for these children. And in return, we get accused of hiding them because we're Indigenous? That tells you everything about how some people see us. The Sullivan case has become a mirror showing Pictou County uncomfortable truths about itself. The racism that Indigenous people experience daily became visible when people were willing to believe reserve communities would hide missing children. That's created its own reckoning. Some community members have spoken up, condemning the racist rumors. Others have stayed silent, which speaks volumes too. Lansdowne is also dealing with what happens after media attention fades. In May and June 2025, the case was front-page news. Reporters were everywhere. Every development was covered extensively. By fall, coverage had diminished. Life moved on for people not directly affected. The children were still missing, but they were no longer headline news unless there was an update. For the community, that fade is both relief and abandonment. Relief because constant media presence is exhausting. Abandonment because if the world stops paying attention, does that mean the case stops mattering? Social media has kept the case alive in ways traditional media hasn't. The true crime coverage I discussed earlier, whatever its problems, has maintained public awareness. People in other provinces, other countries, know about Lilly and Jack Sullivan. But awareness doesn't equal answers. And sometimes the community wishes everyone would just stop talking about it, stop speculating, stop turning their tragedy into entertainment. The psychological services available in rural Nova Scotia have been stretched by this case. Counselors have worked with family members, volunteers, classmates of the missing children, and community members struggling with anxiety and grief. Children who were friends with Lilly and Jack have needed support processing their confusion and fear. Adults have needed help managing their own reactions. The school system has brought in specialists. But resources are limited. Rural areas don't have the mental health infrastructure of cities. Waiting lists are long. People suffer longer than they should. The broader Pictou County region has rallied around Lansdowne. Neighboring communities organized fundraisers for the search efforts. Churches held prayer services. Local businesses donated supplies and services. That solidarity has been one positive in an overwhelmingly tragic situation. When crisis hits, communities can be remarkable in their compassion and willingness to help. But even solidarity has limits. As months pass without resolution, people return to their own lives. The crisis energy fades, and the families directly affected, the Sullivans, the Brooksmoys, the Martells, are left carrying the burden mostly alone. Belinda Gray has spoken publicly about feeling abandoned by people who were intensely involved early on but have since moved on. "I understand people have lives," she said. "But Lilly and Jack don't. They're still missing. That hasn't changed." The case has also affected trust in institutions. Some community members question why Child Protective Services didn't do more given the school's concerns. Others question RCMP's handling of the early investigation. Should they have treated it as potential criminal activity from day one? These aren't necessarily fair critiques. Investigators made reasonable decisions with available information. Child Services worked within their legal framework. But when children are missing, when there's no resolution, people look for someone to blame. And sometimes institutions make convenient targets, especially when answers are scarce. Pictou County has experienced other tragedies in recent years. Hurricane Fiona devastated the region in September 2022. COVID-19 hit rural communities hard. The 2020 mass shooting in Portapique, while not in Pictou County, affected all of Nova Scotia. There's a sense that the province, the region, can't catch a break. Tragedy upon tragedy. And now 2 missing children, with no answers, no closure, no justice. That accumulation of trauma affects community mental health in ways that are hard to measure, but deeply real. People become more anxious, more depressed, more cynical about whether things will ever get better. Some residents have left Lansdowne since the disappearance. Not directly because of the case, necessarily, but it contributed to decisions about where to live, how to raise children, whether this is the place they want to be. Others have stayed, determined to be there when answers come. They maintain hope. They keep Lilly and Jack's memory alive. They support the remaining family members. On May 2nd, 2026, it will be 1 year since the disappearance. The community is already planning a vigil, a remembrance, a recommitment to finding answers. 1 year, 365 days, and 2 children still missing. That anniversary will be brutal for everyone, family, community, investigators. It will generate renewed media attention, which means rehashing everything again, reliving the trauma publicly. But it will also be an opportunity to remind the world that Lilly and Jack matter, that they're not forgotten, that someone, somewhere, might know something and finally be ready to come forward. Because that's what keeps communities going in situations like this. Hope that somehow, someday, there will be answers. Even if those answers are the worst possible outcome, at least there would be closure. At least there would be truth. At least the not knowing would end. For now, Lansdowne Station remains a community in limbo. A place where children vanished. A place that searches for answers. A place that waits. So where are we today, in January 2026, 8 months after Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished? Let me give you the current state of the investigation, what we know, what we don't know, and what might happen next. The official status. The case remains classified under Nova Scotia's Missing Persons Act, not as a criminal investigation. That means officially, investigators are treating this as 2 missing children, not as a crime. However, court documents acknowledge the investigation could become criminal, and persons of interest in the disappearance of the children might be identified. Translation: investigators are keeping options open. They're not calling it criminal yet because they don't have evidence establishing a crime occurred, but they're investigating as if it might be. No one has been named a suspect. No one has been arrested. No charges have been filed against anyone connected to the case. The investigation resources. More than 11 RCMP units have contributed to the investigation. That includes Bullet Operator Major Crime Unit, Bullet Operator Behavioral Analysis Unit, Bullet Operator Forensic Identification Services, Bullet Operator Technological Crime Unit, Bullet Operator Underwater Recovery Team, Bullet Operator Police Dog Services, Bullet Operator Air Services, plus assistance from RCMP units in New Brunswick and Ontario, the National Centre for Missing Persons, and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. This is not a small-town police department overwhelmed by a complex case. This is a coordinated, professional, resource-intensive operation with access to cutting-edge technology and expertise. They've reviewed over 8,100 video files. They've obtained 12 search warrants. They've conducted 86 formal interviews. They've followed up on over 1,050 tips. And they have nothing definitive. The physical evidence. Let's inventory what investigators have found. 1. Lilly's pink blanket, found in 2 pieces in 2 locations on 2 different days. 2. Child-sized boot prints on pipeline trails near the property. 3. Whatever forensic evidence was collected from the home and property, details of which have not been publicly released. That's it. No bodies. No additional clothing. No witness accounts of the children being seen after May 1st. No surveillance footage showing them leaving the property. The absence of evidence is itself significant. Cadaver dogs searched 40 kilometers and found nothing. That suggests strongly that remains are not in the searched areas. So either the children are not deceased, or their remains are somewhere outside the search radius, or they're hidden in a way that defeated sophisticated search techniques. The polygraphs. 7 people connected to the case underwent polygraph examinations. All 7 passed. This is unusual. In cases where family members are involved in a child's disappearance, polygraphs often reveal deception. Not always. Sophisticated liars can beat polygraphs, and innocent people can fail them due to stress. But generally, patterns emerge. Here, everyone passed. Mother, stepfather, biological father, grandparents. That either means everyone is telling the truth, or multiple people are successfully deceiving polygraph examiners, which would be remarkable. Investigators clearly believe the polygraph results are meaningful. No one has been named a suspect despite allegations in court documents. Malihia Brooks-Murray and Daniel Martel have separated. Brooks-Murray left Lansdowne shortly after the disappearance and has largely avoided public statements. Their daughter Meadow was removed from Brooks-Murray's custody by Child Protective Services. That removal occurred after Brooks-Murray fled to Sipeknecatic Reserve, in a context of intense crisis and trauma. Martel has given several media interviews, consistently maintaining his innocence and cooperation with investigators. He's also engaged with true crime coverage online, both defending himself and expressing frustration with how he's been portrayed. Belinda Gray, paternal grandmother, has become a public face of the family's grief. She's organized vigils, given interviews, and called for a public inquiry into both the RCMP investigation and Child Protective Services involvement before the disappearance. Cody Sullivan, biological father, has stayed largely out of public view. He cooperated with investigators, passed his polygraph, and has not been accused by other family members of involvement. The family remains fractured. There's no unified front, no shared narrative about what happened. Different family members have different theories, different suspects in mind, different levels of trust in the investigation. That fracturing is both understandable. Trauma affects everyone differently, and tragic. These families should be supporting each other. Instead, they're divided by suspicion, grief, and competing needs. The Nova Scotia government's $150,000 reward remains available for information leading to the resolution of the case. That's substantial money. That's life-changing money for many people. And yet, no one has come forward with information that's moved the case forward. What does that tell us? Maybe no one knows anything. Maybe the truth is held by a very small number of people, or even just one person, who isn't motivated by money or hasn't seen the reward announcements. Or maybe people do know things, but are afraid to come forward. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of retaliation. Afraid of getting involved in something this serious. Investigators continue to encourage anyone with information to contact the RCMP tip line. They've assured tipsters that information can be provided confidentially. The recent developments. The January 2026 unsealing of court documents was the most recent major development. Those documents revealed bullet operator Brooks-Murray's allegations of physical abuse by Martel. Bullet operator Child Protective Services involvement months before the disappearance. Bullet operator details about the early investigation timeline. Bullet operator witness statements about hearing vehicles during the night before the disappearance. Bullet operator polygraph results for family members. The unsealing occurred after media organizations argued the public had a right to know details of the investigation. The court agreed, though some details remain redacted to protect the investigation. Martel responded to the unsealed documents by denying all abuse allegations and reiterating his cooperation with police. He expressed frustration that details were being made public while the investigation was ongoing. In October 2025, RCMP announced they had deployed specialized teams to conduct new searches in specific areas of interest. They didn't disclose what led them to those areas or what they were hoping to find. The searches turned up nothing that moved the case forward, at least not publicly. What might happen next? Several possibilities for how this case might develop. Scenario 1. A witness comes forward. Someone who knows something decides to talk. Maybe guilt becomes unbearable. Maybe they realize information they thought was insignificant is actually crucial. Maybe the reward money finally motivates them. This is how many cold cases break. Not through brilliant detective work, but through someone's conscience or circumstances changing. Scenario 2. Physical evidence is found. Remains are discovered by hikers, construction workers, hunters, or new forensic testing reveals something in evidence already collected. This could happen tomorrow or years from now. Bodies are sometimes found decades after disappearances, in locations that were searched multiple times. Scenario 3. Digital evidence provides breakthrough. Technology advances. Old phone records are reanalyzed with new techniques. Deleted files are recovered. Patterns emerge that weren't visible initially. The RCMP's reference to technologically based investigative techniques suggests they're pursuing this angle. Results could take months or years. Scenario 4. Confession. Someone involved confesses. Maybe as part of a plea deal in an unrelated case. Maybe in therapy or to a friend who goes to police. Maybe on a deathbed years from now. Confessions happen in unexpected ways and unexpected times. Scenario 5. The case goes cold. The least satisfying possibility, nothing happens. Tips dry up. Leads are exhausted. Investigators continue working the case, but without intensity. Years pass. The file remains open but dormant. This is the fate of many missing persons cases. Not officially closed, but not actively progressing. Just waiting for the lucky break that may never come. What investigators need. Staff Sergeant McCommon has been clear about what would help the investigation. First, anyone with surveillance or trail camera footage from May 1st through May 3rd, 2025, anywhere in Pictou County. Even if it seems irrelevant, investigators want to see it. Second, anyone who saw the children during that time period, even brief sightings. Third, anyone with information about vehicles in the area, particularly on Gairloch Road or nearby trails during the early morning hours of May 2nd. Fourth, anyone who has information about the children's well-being or home situation in the months before the disappearance. The RCMP has set up a dedicated tip line. They've assigned investigators specifically to follow up on tips. They've promised confidentiality for sources. And still, the information that would break this case hasn't come. May 2nd, 2026 will mark 1 year since Lilly and Jack vanished. That anniversary will bring renewed media attention, new appeals for information, and painful reflection for everyone involved. Anniversaries in unsolved cases often generate tips. People who've been sitting on information sometimes decide the 1-year mark is significant enough to come forward. Media coverage reminds people who might have seen something to contact police. Investigators are hoping the anniversary generates renewed interest and fresh information. But they're also preparing families for the reality that 1 year might pass with no more answers than they have today. For those of us not directly involved in this case, what's our responsibility? First, if you have information, report it. Don't assume it's not important. Don't convince yourself someone else has already mentioned it. Call the tip line. Second, be cautious about spreading speculation and rumors. Share facts, share official information, but don't present theories as facts. Don't accuse people of crimes without evidence. Third, remember these are real people, real children, real families. Not characters in a true crime story. Not entertainment. Real human beings living through unimaginable pain. Fourth, support calls for resources for missing persons investigations, for mental health services in rural communities, for child protective services reform. Turn this tragedy into motivation for systemic improvement. And finally, keep Lilly and Jack in public consciousness. Share their photos. Talk about their case. Keep pressure on for answers. Because somewhere, someone knows something. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. And maybe, if enough people keep talking about this case, that someone will finally come forward. Let's talk about the questions that keep investigators, families, and everyone following this case awake at night. Because the Sullivan case isn't just mysterious, it's full of specific puzzles that don't have satisfying answers. Question 1. How do two children vanish without a trace? Lilly was 6. Jack was 4. They were at their home on a rural property. Multiple adults were present: mother, stepfather, step-grandmother. The timeline suggests the children were playing outside around 8:50 a.m. They were gone by the time their mother called 911 at 10:01 a.m. That's approximately 70 minutes. In that time, they completely vanished. No credible sightings. No remains found despite massive searches. No evidence beyond boot prints and a torn blanket. How? If they walked into the wilderness, why did cadaver dogs find nothing? Young children don't cover great distances quickly. Search dogs should have tracked them. If they were abducted by a stranger, how did that stranger access the property, take two children, and leave without being seen? The property isn't right on a main road. You can't just drive up, grab kids, and leave without risk of witnesses. If they were taken by someone known to them, who passed polygraphs, and had no apparent motive. If something happened at the home and evidence was disposed of elsewhere, how was this accomplished without digital evidence of travel, without witnesses seeing vehicles, without forensic evidence at the home? Every scenario has problems. Question 2. What happened to the pink blanket? This piece of evidence is crucial and deeply puzzling. First piece, found approximately 1 kilometer from the home, caught in a tree on Lansdowne Road, on the afternoon of May 2nd. Second piece, found in a trash bag at the end of the driveway 2 days later, on May 4th. This doesn't make sense in any straightforward scenario. If Lilly carried the blanket while walking away, it could have caught and torn. But why would part of it show up days later in trash at the driveway? Did she or Jack drop it on the way out? Why didn't searchers find it immediately? If someone tore the blanket intentionally to create evidence, why? What purpose does that serve? And why would they place pieces in 2 locations discovered days apart? If the blanket was never with the children that morning, if it was placed to mislead, that implies planning and staging. But by whom? Family members pass polygraphs. The blanket should tell us something. Instead, it just creates more questions. Question 3. What do the boot prints mean? Child-sized boot prints, 2 different sizes, were found on pipeline trails near the property. Boots that were missing from the home. This suggests the children left on foot, wearing their boots, walking together. But if they walked those trails, where did they go? The trails were extensively searched. Dogs tracked them. Nothing was found. Did someone pick them up from the trails? If so, wouldn't residents along those trails have seen a vehicle? Trails don't have many access points for vehicles. That's why they're used for walking and ATVs. Could someone have carried them out? 2 children, ages 6 and 4, would be heavy and awkward to carry. You'd be seen. You'd leave evidence. Or were the boot prints left by someone else wearing the children's boots, creating false evidence? Again, we're back to staging. But staging by whom and why? Question 4. What did Child Protective Services know and do? This is the question that haunts Belinda Gray and other family members. A social worker visited the home months before the disappearance. This visit was prompted by concerns raised by Salt Springs Elementary School about the children's appearance and well-being. The school reported children arriving grubby, without appropriate winter clothing, appearing thin and possibly malnourished, with dry cracked lips. Jack had a black eye in a December photo. These are red flags. These are exactly the kind of indicators that should trigger child protection response. So what happened? What did the social worker observe? What assessment was made? What follow-up occurred? We don't know. Privacy laws protect those details. But the result is clear. The children remained in the home. No removal occurred. No ongoing supervision was mandated, or if it was, we haven't been told. Then, months later, those children vanished. Could Child Protective Services have prevented this? Did they miss warning signs? Did they properly assess risk? Or were the concerns investigated and found to be explainable? Were the children actually safe, and this tragedy couldn't have been predicted or prevented by child services? Without transparency, we can't know. And that unknowing drives calls for a public inquiry. Question 5. What do the allegations of domestic violence mean for this case? Brooks Murray's allegations that Martell was physically abusive create an obvious question. If domestic violence was occurring, could it have escalated to harm the children? Domestic violence is a risk factor in family homicides. Children in homes where intimate partner violence occurs are at elevated risk. But Martell denies the allegations. He passed a polygraph. There's no evidence he harmed the children. It's possible both things are true, that Martell was abusive toward Brooks Murray in ways that would pass a polygraph about the children's disappearance. Abuse toward a partner doesn't automatically mean abuse toward children. It's also possible the allegations emerged in the trauma and chaos after the disappearance and don't reflect reality. People say things when relationships end. Accusations fly. Not all of them are true. We can't know which scenario is accurate. But the allegations hang over the case, creating suspicion and complicating public perception. Question 6. Why did Brooks Murray leave and stop cooperating publicly? This question generates the most speculation online. Brooks Murray left Lansdowne quickly after the disappearance. She separated from Martell. She blocked him on social media. She fled to Saipekankatik Reserve. She largely stopped giving interviews and making public statements. True crime sleuths interpret this as guilty behavior. Innocent mothers don't hide, they say, but that's not how trauma works. Brooks Murray is an Indigenous woman whose 2 children vanished. She was in a relationship she alleges was abusive. She became the subject of intense public scrutiny and suspicion. She watched online communities accuse her of terrible things. Fleeing that situation is rational. Seeking safety in her First Nation community makes sense. Stopping communication that's causing harm is self-protection. Or, and this is the speculation, she knows something she's not saying. She's protecting someone or herself. Her silence isn't trauma response, but guilty knowledge. We cannot know which interpretation is correct. And publicly accusing a traumatized mother of hiding information about her missing children is cruel unless there's actual evidence. Investigators have interviewed her multiple times. She passed a polygraph. She hasn't been named a suspect. That should matter more than armchair analysis of why she left Lansdowne. Question 7. What about the vehicle sounds witnesses reported? 2 neighbors reported hearing a vehicle coming and going during the early morning hours of May 2nd. One witness said vehicles arrived and departed 5 or 6 times. This is potentially crucial. If vehicles were active during the night before the children disappeared, that could explain how they left the area without being seen walking. But RCMP reviewed surveillance footage from the area and found no evidence corroborating these witness accounts. Martell denied any family members left the property that night. So were the witnesses mistaken? Confused about timing? Hearing vehicles on a different night? Or is there an explanation that hasn't emerged yet? If those vehicles existed, whose were they? Where were they going? What were they doing? This question remains unanswered. Question 8. What is the RCMP not telling us? This is the question that generates the most frustration. Investigators clearly know things they're not sharing publicly. Court documents reference evidence and investigative techniques that remain redacted. Press briefings are vague. Why the secrecy? The official answer: protecting investigative integrity. Not revealing details that only the perpetrator would know. Not compromising potential court proceedings. These are legitimate reasons. But they leave the public and families in the dark. How much do investigators know? Do they have suspects they're not naming? Do they have theories they're not sharing? Are they close to resolution or completely stymied? We don't know. And that unknown creates space for speculation, conspiracy theories, and frustration. But here's the reality. Investigators don't owe the public full disclosure during an active investigation. It might feel that way, especially in high-profile cases, but legally and practically, they need to hold information close. If this case goes to trial, everything they've said publicly can be used by defense attorneys. Every detail released can be challenged. Every theory shared can taint jury pools. So they stay quiet. They work methodically, and they hope that when they're ready to make a move, they've protected the case enough that charges will stick. Question 9. Are the children alive? This is the question families ask every single day. Statistically, the odds are grim. Children who go missing and aren't found quickly are usually deceased. That's the brutal truth of missing persons cases. But statistics aren't certainty. Children have been found alive years after disappearances. J.C. Dugard was held for 18 years. Elizabeth Smart was recovered after 9 months. Sean Hornbeck was found after 4 years. It happens. It's rare, but it happens. So Belinda Gray holds on to hope. Cody Sullivan allows himself to imagine reunion. Even Daniel Martel talks about the children in present tense sometimes, as if they might walk through a door. Are they alive? We don't know. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. But possibility is enough to keep families breathing. Question 10. Will this case ever be solved? Ultimately, this is the question that matters most. Will investigators find answers? Will families get closure? Will justice be served if this was a crime? Cases like this can go either way. Some remain unsolved forever. Others break decades later through unexpected developments. The Sullivan case is still relatively fresh. Resources are still devoted to it. Technology is advancing rapidly. Methods that don't exist yet might emerge in coming years. There's reason for cautious hope, but there's also reason for realism. Without physical evidence, without witnesses, without digital breadcrumbs, cases become nearly impossible to solve. Unless someone talks, unless someone confesses, unless someone's conscience forces them to come forward. That's what investigators are waiting for. That's what families are praying for. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. The question is whether that person will ever tell. Belinda Gray, paternal grandmother, said something in an interview that captures the impossible reality of having grandchildren missing. Every morning I wake up, and for just a second, I forget. Then it comes crashing back, they're gone. And I have to survive another day not knowing. That's the daily experience of families with missing loved ones. Not grief, exactly, because grief implies something ended. This is suspended animation, frozen between hope and despair. Cody Sullivan lost his children years before they disappeared. His own absence from their lives is something he'll carry forever. Now they're physically gone too, and he lives with the double weight of having missed their lives and potentially having lost them permanently. For Malihia Brooks Murray, the pain must be exponentially worse. She's the mother. She was there that morning. Her children vanished while she was in the next room. Whether she bears any responsibility or is purely a victim of circumstances, she lives with the reality that she didn't protect them. That's a weight that never lifts. Daniel Martel exists in public purgatory, not charged with anything, not cleared of suspicion, accused by his former partner, scrutinized by thousands of strangers, suspected by many. If he's innocent, this is a nightmare from which he can't wake up. If he's guilty, the pressure must be enormous. And step-grandmother Janie McKenzie, who heard the children playing that morning and then fell asleep. What does she carry? The knowledge that if she'd stayed awake, watched them, maybe they'd be safe? These are the human faces behind this case. These are the people who don't get to move on when we stop reading, when the video ends, when the next case captures our attention. They're left with permanent grief, permanent questions, permanent pain. Lansdowne Station will forever be known as the place where 2 children vanished. That's not fair to the community. The people who live there are good people. They searched tirelessly. They held vigils. They supported families. They did everything possible. But their community is now defined by tragedy. Property values will be affected. Tourism will be impacted. The psychological toll will last for generations. Children growing up in Lansdowne now will always have this story in their background. That's where those kids disappeared. That's the house where it happened. The community deserves better. But tragedies attach themselves to places, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The RCMP has invested enormous resources into this case. Hundreds of officer hours, specialized units, technology, expertise, and they have no resolution. That's not a criticism. Sometimes cases are genuinely unsolvable with available evidence. But it's frustrating for everyone, investigators included. Staff Sergeant McCommon and his team are professionals. They're doing everything right. They're following leads, analyzing evidence, pursuing every angle. But without the break they need, the witness, the confession, the physical evidence, they're stuck. And with each passing month, the case gets colder. Tips slow down. Public attention wanes. Resources get redirected to newer cases. That's the reality of police work. You can't devote infinite resources to one case forever, no matter how tragic. Eventually, this case will be assigned to a cold case unit. It will be reviewed periodically. Investigators will hope new technology or a lucky break provides answers. But active, intensive investigation will end. That's the brutal truth families face. Eventually, the world moves on even when they can't. Realistically, several things could happen in the coming months and years. Best case scenario, someone comes forward with information that breaks the case open. Lilly and Jack are found, hopefully alive, but at least providing closure. Justice is served if this was a crime. Families get answers. That's unlikely but possible. More likely scenario, the case continues as it has been. Occasional developments. Periodic searches. Regular reviews of evidence. Slow progress or no progress. The one-year anniversary in May will generate renewed attention. Maybe that produces tips. Maybe it moves the investigation forward. Or maybe it just marks 1 year of families living without answers. Worst case scenario, the case goes fully cold. Years pass. Investigators move on. The public forgets. And Lilly and Jack become another tragic unsolved case that true crime channels revisit periodically, but that never gets resolved. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope for families' sake, for the community's sake, for the children's sake, that answers come. But hope doesn't solve cases. Evidence does. Witnesses do. Confessions do. And so far, those elements are missing. Lilly Sullivan was 6 years old when she vanished. She loved girly things. She was protective of her little brother. She should be in 1st grade now, learning to read, making friends, living the normal life of a child. Jack Sullivan was 4 years old. He loved bugs and dinosaurs. He looked up to his big sister. He should be in kindergarten now, asking endless questions, exploring the world, growing up. Instead, they're missing. 8 months of absence. 8 months of searching. 8 months of unanswered questions. 2 children. Real children with real futures that have been stolen. That's what we need to remember when we discuss this case. Not the mystery. Not the drama. Not the speculation. The children. Lilly and Jack Sullivan deserve to be found. They deserve to be brought home. They deserve justice if someone harmed them, or peace if this was a tragic accident, or reunion if by some miracle they're still alive. Their families deserve answers. Their community deserves closure. And all of us following this case have a responsibility to remember they're people, not content. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, please contact the RCMP at their dedicated tip line. Even if you think it's not important. Even if you're not sure. Call. Someone knows something. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe that piece of information you think is nothing is actually everything. Call. Please. And for the rest of us, share this case. Keep Lilly and Jack in public consciousness. Keep pressure on for answers. Don't let this become another forgotten tragedy. These children matter. Their lives matter. And finding them matters. That's where we are with the Sullivan case. 8 months in. No arrests. No resolution. No answers. Just 2 missing children, and everyone waiting for truth. If you found this investigation helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to Cold Case Desk. Share this video with anyone you think should hear this story. Leave a comment with your thoughts, but please, keep it respectful. These are real families going through real trauma. I'll continue following this case, and will bring you updates as they develop. Until next time, remember, someone out there knows what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. If that's you, make the call. This is Cold Case Desk, signing off.